to Fast Asleep with Gina Marie, and welcome to exciting times for us right here. I'm Gina, and Marie, Engineer Bob, and I are very grateful to all of you who enjoy classic short stories. It is your interest that has really made a difference for us lately, and the platforms where you have found Fast Asleep, what do you know, are actually noticing. Sure, we have to jump through a few new hoops for all this, but don't worry, we'll smooth things out right away, and we will still provide you with a wide variety of award-winning short stories. We're not going to waste your time with anything else. Besides, we have to be careful because we have, hands down, the most loyal followers. You know who you are, and we do thank you very, very much. So let's get to today's author. There have been quite a few requests for Stephen King, but I personally, as I've told Bob and Marie, I personally have a concern that a few of you may feel, as I once did, that there is just one very dark dimension to Stephen King. As a matter of fact, when I was pregnant and then when I was a new mom, I completely stayed away from his stuff, honestly, for a few years. I knew nothing yet of the clearly tender side of his work. Today's story easily proves there is a touching, compassionate side. We have a thoughtful tale of a big brother's love for his little sister. So you can look forward to that today and more in future episodes. If you haven't already read The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, and Hearts in Atlantis, do it. Yes, they are all from Stephen King. Alrighty, you know what we always do before the story. A little background on today's author. So, from laundry worker to English teacher to 350 million books sold, Stephen King is now the most famous and successful horror writer of all time. He was born in Portland, Maine in 1947 to parents who divorced when he and his brother were very young. He graduated from high school in Maine and went on to get his English degree 1970, I believe, from the University of Maine at Orono. He wrote for the university newspaper and got his first short story published while he was attending there. He's gone on to write more than 200 short stories since then. Mr. King sold his first novel, Carrie, in 1973. Its amazing success allowed him to write full-time. The man knows how to write, and write fast. He published several books each year throughout the 1980s and the 1990s. And so many of them have become either a film or a television series. Misery, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile. Oh, they prove he really is the king. His awards, you're not going to get me to do it. They're way too numerous to list here. But I will say they include the National Medal of Arts, 2014. These days, Stephen King is happily married to his wife of 53 years, Tabitha. They have 3 children, 2 are writers, and 1 is a reverend. And it's time. You will not soon forget this story. Published first in Cavalier magazine between 1970 and 1975. Tuck in, everybody, for Stephen King's The Last Rung on the Ladder. I got Katrina's letter yesterday, less than a week after my father and I got back from Los Angeles. It was addressed to Wilmington, Delaware, and I'd moved twice since then. People move around so much now, and it's funny how those crossed-off addresses and change of address stickers can look like accusations. Her letter was rumpled and smudged, one of the corners dog-eared from handling. I read what was in it. And the next thing I knew, I was standing in the living room with the phone in my hand, getting ready to call Dad. I put the phone down with something like horror. He was an old man, and he'd had 2 heart attacks. Was I going to call him and tell about Katrina's letter so soon after we'd been in L.A.? To do that might very well have killed him. So I didn't call, and I had no one I could tell. A thing like that letter, it's too personal to tell anyone, except a wife or a very close friend. I haven't made many close friends in the last few years, and my wife Helen and I divorced in 1971. What we exchange now are Christmas cards. How are you? How's the job? Have a happy new year. I've been awake all night with Katrina's letter. She could have put it on a postcard. There was only a single sentence below the "Dear Larry," but a sentence can mean enough. It can do enough. I remembered my dad on the plane, his face seeming old and wasted in the harsh sunlight at 18,000 feet as we went west from New York. We had just passed over Omaha, according to the pilot, and Dad said, "It's a lot further away than it looks, Larry." There was a heavy sadness in his voice that made me uncomfortable because I couldn't understand it. I understood it better after getting Katrina's letter. We grew up 80 miles west of Omaha in a town called Hemingford Home. My dad, my mom, my sister Katrina, and me. I was 2 years older than Katrina, whom everyone called Kitty. Oh, she was a beautiful child and a beautiful woman. Even at 8, the year of the incident in the barn, you could see that her corn silk hair was never going to darken, and that those eyes would always be a dark Scandinavian blue. A look in those eyes and a man would be gone. I guess you'd say we grew up hicks. My dad had 300 acres of flat, rich land, and he grew feed corn and raised cattle. Everybody just called it the home place. In those days, all the roads were dirt, except Interstate 80 and Nebraska Route 96. And a trip to town was something you waited 3 days for. Nowadays, I'm one of the best independent corporation lawyers in America. So they tell me. And I'd have to admit, for the sake of honesty, that I think they're right. A president of a large company once introduced me to his board of directors as his hired gun. I wear expensive suits, and my shoe leather is the best. I've got 3 assistants on full-time pay, and I can call in another dozen if I need them. But in those days, I walked up a dirt road to a 1-room school with books tied in a belt over my shoulder. And Katrina walked with me. Sometimes in the spring, we went barefoot. Well, that was in the days before you couldn't get served in a diner or shop in a market unless you were wearing shoes. Later on, my mother died. Katrina and I were in high school up in Columbia City then. And 2 years after that, my dad lost the place and went to work selling tractors. It was the end of the family. Although that didn't seem so bad then. Dad got along in his work, bought himself a dealership, and got tapped for a management position about 9 years ago. I got a football scholarship to the University of Nebraska and managed to learn something, besides how to run the ball out of a slot right formation. And Katrina? But it's her I want to tell you about. It happened. The barn thing. One Saturday in early November. To tell you the truth, I can't pin down the actual year, but Ike was still president. Mom was at a bake sale in Columbia City, and Dad had gone over to our nearest neighbors, that was 7 miles away, to help the man fix a hay rake. There was supposed to be a hired man on the place, but he had never showed up that day, and my dad fired him not a month later. Dad left me a list of chores to do, and there were some for Kitty, too, and told us not to get to playing until they were all done. But that wasn't long. It was November, and by that time of the year, the make or break time had gone past. We'd made it again that year. We wouldn't always. I remember that day very clearly. The sky was overcast, and while it wasn't cold, you could feel it wanting to be cold, wanting to get down to the business of frost and freeze, snow and sleet. The fields were stripped. The animals were sluggish and morose. There seemed to be a funny little draft in the house that had never been there before. On a day like that, the only really nice place to be was the barn. It was warm, filled with a pleasant mixed aroma of hay and fur and dung, and with the mysterious chuckling cooing sounds of the barn swallows high up in the third loft. If you cricked your neck up, you could see the white November light coming through the chinks in the roof and try to spell your name. It was a game that really only seemed agreeable on overcast autumn days. There was a ladder nailed to a crossbeam high up in the third loft, a ladder that went straight down to the main barn floor. We were forbidden to climb on it because it was old and shaky. Dad had promised Mom 1,000 times that he would pull it down and put up a stronger one. But something else always seemed to come up when there was time. Helping a neighbor with his hay rake, for instance. And the hired man was just not working out. If you climbed up that rickety ladder, there were exactly 43 rungs. Kitty and I had counted them enough to know. You ended up on a beam that was 70 feet above the straw-littered barn floor. And then if you edged out along the beam, about 12 feet, your knees jittering, your ankle joints creaking, your mouth dry and tasting like a used fuse, you stood over the haymow. And then you could jump off the beam and fall 70 feet straight down with a horrible, hilarious, dying swoop into a huge, soft bed of lush hay. It has a sweet smell, hay does. And you'd come to rest in that smell of reborn summer with your stomach left behind you, way up there in the middle of the air, and you'd feel, well, like Lazarus must have felt. You had taken the fall and lived to tell the tale. Oh, it was a forbidden sport, all right. If we had been caught, my mother would have shrieked blue murder, and my father would have laid on the strap, even at our advanced ages. Because of the ladder, and because if you happened to lose your balance and topple from the beam before you had edged out over the loose fathoms of hay, you would fall to utter destruction on the hard planking of the barn floor. But the temptation was just too great. When the cats are away, well, you know how that one goes. That day started like all the others, a delicious feeling of dread mixed with anticipation. We stood at the foot of the ladder, looking at each other. Kitty's color was high, her eyes darker and more sparkling than ever. "Dare you," I said, promptly from Kitty. "Dares go first," promptly from me. "Girls go before boys." "Not if it's dangerous," she said, casting her eyes down demurely, as if everybody didn't know she was the second biggest tomboy in Hemmingford. But that was how she was about it. Oh, she would go, but she wouldn't go first. "Okay," I said. "Here I go." I was 10 that year, and thin as Scratch the Demon. About 90 pounds. Kitty was 8 and 20 pounds lighter. The ladder had always held us before. We thought it would always hold us again, which is a philosophy that gets men and nations in trouble, time after time. I could feel it that day, beginning to shimmy around a little bit in the dusty barn air as I climbed higher and higher. As always, about halfway up I entertained a vision of what would happen to me if it suddenly let go and gave up the ghost. But I kept going until I was able to clap my hands around the beam and boost myself up and look down. Kitty's face, turned up to watch me, was a small, white oval. In her faded check shirt and blue denims, she looked like a doll. Above me, still higher in the dusty reaches of the eaves, the swallows cooed mellowly. Again, by rote. "Hi down there," I called, my voice floating down to her on motes of chaff. "Hi up there." I stood up, swayed back and forth a little. As always, there seemed suddenly to be strange currents in the air that had not existed down below. I could hear my own heartbeat as I began to inch along with my arms held out for balance. Once, a swallow had swooped close by my head during this part of the adventure, and drawing back, I had almost lost my balance. I lived in fear of the same thing happening again. But not this time. At last, I stood above the safety of the hay. Now looking down was not so much frightening as sensual. There was a moment of anticipation. Then I stepped off into space, holding my nose for effect. And as always, the sudden grip of gravity yanking me down brutally, making me plummet It made me feel like yelling, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, let me back up." And then I hit the hay, shot into it, like a projectile, its sweet and dusty smell billowing up around me, still going down, as if into heavy water, coming slowly to rest, buried in the stuff. As always, I could feel a sneeze building up in my nose and hear a frightened field mouse or two fleeing for a more serene section of the hay mow, and feel in that curious way that I had been reborn. I remember Kitty telling me once that after diving into the hay, she felt fresh and new like a baby. I shrugged it off at the time, sort of knowing what she meant, sort of not knowing. But since I got her letter, I think about that, too. I climbed out of the hay, sort of swimming through it until I could climb out onto the barn floor. I had hay down my pants and down the back of my shirt. It was on my sneakers and sticking to my elbows. Hay seeds in my hair? You bet. She was halfway up the ladder by then, her gold pigtails bouncing against her shoulder blades, climbing through a dusty shaft of light. On other days, that light might have been as bright as her hair, but on this day, her pigtails had no competition. They were easily the most colorful thing up there. I remember thinking that I didn't like the way the ladder was swaying back and forth. It seemed like it had never been so loosey-goosey. And then she was on the beam, high above me. Now, I was the small one. My face was the small, white, upturned oval, as her voice floated down on errant chaff, stirred up by my leap. "Hi down there." "Hi up there." She edged along the beam, and my heart loosened a little in my chest when I judged she was over the safety of the hay. It always did, although she was more graceful than I was, and more athletic, if that doesn't sound like too strange a thing to say about your kid sister. She stood poising on the toes of her old low-topped keds, hands out in front of her. And then she swanned. Talk about things you can't forget, things you can't describe. Well, I can describe it, in a way, but not in a way that will make you understand how beautiful that was, how perfect. One of the few things in my life that seem utterly real, utterly true. No, I can't tell you that. I don't have the skill with either my pen or my tongue. For a moment, she seemed to hang in the air as if borne up by one of those mysterious updrafts that only existed in the third loft. A bright swallow with golden plumage, such as Nebraska has never seen since. She was Kitty, my sister. Her arms swept up behind her and her back arched, and how I loved her for that beat of time. And then she came down and plowed into the hay and out of sight. An explosion of chaff and giggles rose out of the hole she'd made. I'd forgotten about how rickety the ladder had looked with her on it, and by the time she was out, I was halfway up again. I tried to swan myself, but the fear grabbed me, the way it always did, and my swan turned into a cannonball. I think I never believed the hay was there, the way Kitty believed it. How long did the game go on? Well, hard to tell, but I looked up some 10 or 12 dives later and saw the light had changed. Our mom and dad were due back, and we were all covered with chaff. As good as a signed confession, we agreed on one more turn each. Going up first, I felt the ladder moving beneath me, and I could hear, very faintly, the whining rasp of old nails loosening up in the wood. And for the first time, I was really, actively scared. I think if I'd been closer to the bottom, I would have gone down, and then that would have been the end of it. But the beam was closer and seemed safer. 3 rungs from the top, the whine of pulling nails grew louder, and I was suddenly cold with terror, with the certainty that I had pushed it too far. Then I had the splintery beam in my hands, taking my weight off the ladder, and there was a cold, unpleasant sweat matting the twigs of hay to my forehead. Oh, the fun of the game was gone. I hurried out over the hay and dropped off. Even the pleasurable part of the drop was gone. Coming down, I imagined how I'd feel if that was solid barn planking coming up to meet me, instead of the yielding give of the hay. I came out to the middle of the barn to see Kitty. Hurrying up the ladder, I called, "Hey, come down. It's not safe." "It'll hold me," she called back confidently. "I'm lighter than you." "Kitty!" But that never got finished, because that was when the ladder let go. Stay with me. I'll be right back. I called. "Hey, come down. It's not safe." "It'll hold me," she called back confidently. "I'm lighter than you." "Kitty!" But that never got finished because that was when the ladder let go. It went with a rotted, splintering crack. I cried out and Kitty screamed. She was about where I had been when I'd become convinced I'd pressed my luck too far. The rung she was standing on gave way, and then both sides of the ladder split. For a moment, the ladder below her, which had broken entirely free, looked like a ponderous insect, a praying mantis or ladder bug, which had just decided to walk off. And then it toppled, hitting the barn floor with a flat clap that raised dust and caused the cows to move worriedly. One of them kicked at its stall door. Kitty uttered a high, piercing scream. "Larry! Larry, help me!" I knew what had to be done. I saw right away. I was terribly afraid, but not quite scared out of my wits. She was better than 60 feet above me, her blue-jeaned legs kicking wildly at the blank air, the barn swallows cooing above her. Oh, I was scared all right. And you know, I still can't watch a circus aerial act, not even on TV. It makes my stomach feel weak. But I knew what had to be done. "Kitty!" I bawled up at her. "Just hold still. Hold still." She obeyed me instantly. Her legs stopped kicking, and she hung straight down, her small hands clutching the last rung on the ragged end of the ladder, like an acrobat whose trapeze has stopped. I ran to the hay mow, clutched up a double handful of the stuff, ran back and dropped it. I went back again and again and again. I really don't remember it after that, except the hay got up my nose and I started sneezing and I couldn't stop, and I ran back and forth, building a haystack where the foot of the ladder had been. It was a very small haystack, looking at it and then looking at her, hanging so far above it. You might have thought of one of those cartoons where the guy jumps 300 feet into a water glass. Back and forth. Back and forth. "Larry, I can't hold on much longer." Her voice was high and despairing. "Kitty, you've got to. You've got to hold on." Back and forth. Hay down my shirt. Back and forth. The haystack was as high as my chin now, but the hay mow we had been diving into was 25 feet deep. I thought that if she only broke her legs, it would be getting off cheap. And I knew if she missed the hay altogether, she would be killed. Back and forth. "Larry, the rung, it's letting go." I could hear the steady, rasping cry of the rung pulling free under her weight. Her legs began to kick again in panic, but if she was thrashing like that, she would surely miss the hay. "No!" I yelled. "No, stop that! Just let go. Let go, Kitty." Because it was too late for me to get any more hay. Too late for anything except blind hope. She let go and dropped the second I told her to. She came straight down like a knife. It seemed to me that she'd dropped forever. Her gold pigtails standing straight up from her head, her eyes shut, her face as pale as china. She didn't scream. Her hands were locked in front of her lips as if she was praying. And she struck the hay right in the center. She went down, out of sight in it. Hay flew up all around us as if a shell had struck. And I heard the thump of her body hitting the boards. The sound, a loud thud, sent a deadly chill into me. It had been too loud, much too loud. But I had to see. Starting to cry, I pounced on the haystack and pulled it apart, flinging the straw behind me in great handfuls. A blue-jeaned leg came to light, then a plaid shirt, and then Kitty's face. It was deadly pale, and her eyes were shut. She was dead. I knew it as I looked at her. The world went gray for me, November gray. The only thing in it with any color were her pigtails, bright gold. And then the deep blue of her irises as she opened her eyes. "Kitty?" My voice was hoarse, husky, unbelieving. My throat was coated with hay chaff. "Kitty?" "Larry?" she asked, bewildered. "Am I alive?" I picked her out of the hay and hugged her, and she put her arms around my neck and hugged me back. "You're alive," I said. "You're alive, you're alive." She had broken her left ankle. And that was all. Dr. Peterson, the GP from Columbia City, came out to the barn with my father and me, looked up into the shadows for a long time. The last rung on the ladder still hung there, aslant, from one nail. He looked, as I said, for a long time. "A miracle," he said to my father, and then kicked disdainfully at the hay I'd put down. He went out to his dusty DeSoto and drove away. My father's hand came down on my shoulder. "We're going to the woodshed, Larry," he said in a very calm voice. "I believe you know what's going to happen there." "Yes, sir," I whispered. "Every time I whack you, Larry, I want you to thank God your sister is still alive." "Yes, sir." And then we went. He whacked me plenty of times, so many times. I ate standing up for a week, and with a cushion on my chair for 2 weeks after that, and every time he whacked me with his big red calloused hand, I thanked God in a loud, loud voice. By the last 2 or 3 whacks, I was pretty sure he was hearing me. They let me in to see her just before bedtime. There was a catbird outside her window, I remember that. Her foot, all wrapped up, was propped on a board. She looked at me so long and so lovingly that I was uncomfortable. And then she said, "Hay! You put down hay!" "Of course I did," I blurted. "What else would I do? Once the ladder broke, there was no way to get up there." "I didn't know what you were doing," she said. "Oh, you must have. I was right under you, for cripe's sake." "I didn't dare look down," she said. "I was too scared. I had my eyes shut the whole time." I stared at her, thunderstruck. "You didn't know? You didn't know what I was doing?" She shook her head. "And when I told you to let go, you just did it?" She nodded. "Kitty, how could you do that?" She looked at me with those deep blue eyes. "I knew you must have been doing something to fix it," she said. "You're my big brother. I knew you'd take care of me." "Oh, Kitty, you don't know how close it was." I put my hands over my face. She sat up and took them away. She kissed my cheek. "No," she said, "but I knew you were down there." Oh, I am sleepy. I'll see you tomorrow, Larry. I'm going to have a cast, Dr. Peterson says. She had the cast on for a little less than a month, and all her classmates signed it. She even got me to sign it, and when it came off, well, that was the end of the barn incident. My father replaced the ladder up to the third loft with a new, strong one. But I never climbed up to the beam and jumped off into the haymow again. So far as I know, Kitty didn't either. It was the end, but somehow, not the end. Somehow, it never ended. Until 9 days ago, when Kitty jumped from the top story of an insurance building in Los Angeles. I have the clipping from the LA Times in my wallet. I guess I'll always carry it. Not in the good way you carry snapshots of people you want to remember, or theater tickets from a really good show, or part of the program from a World Series game. I carry that clipping the way you carry something heavy, because carrying it is your work. The headline reads, "Call girl swan dives to her death." We grew up. That's all I know, other than facts that don't mean anything. She was going to go to business college in Omaha, but in the summer after she graduated from high school, she won a beauty contest and married one of the judges. Sounds like a dirty joke, doesn't it? My Kitty. While I was in law school, she got divorced and wrote me a long letter, 10 pages or more, telling me how it had been, how messy it had been, how it might have been better if she could have had a child. She asked me if I could come. But losing a week in law school, it's like losing a term as a liberal arts undergraduate. Those guys are greyhounds. If you lose sight of the little mechanical rabbit, it's gone forever. She moved out to LA and got married again. When that one broke up, I was out of law school. There was another letter, a shorter one, more bitter. She was never going to get stuck on that merry-go-round, she told me. It was a fixed job, The only way you could catch the brass ring was to tumble off the horse and crack your skull. If that was what the price of a free ride was, who wanted it? P.S. Can you come, Larry? It's been a while. I wrote back and told her I'd love to come, but I couldn't. I had landed a job in a high-pressure firm, low guy on the totem pole, all the work, none of the credit. If I was going to make it up to the next step, it would have to be that year. That was my long letter. And it was all about my career. I answered all of her letters, but I could never really believe that it was really Kitty who was writing them, you know? No more than I could really believe that the hay was really there. Until it broke my fall at the bottom of the drop and saved my life. I couldn't believe that my sister and the beaten woman who signed Kitty in a circle at the bottom of her letters were really the same person. My sister was a girl with pigtails, still without breasts. She was the one who stopped writing. I'd get Christmas cards and birthday cards, and my wife would reciprocate. And then we got divorced, and I moved and just forgot. The next Christmas and birthday after, the cards came through the forwarding address, the first one. And I kept thinking, gee, I've got to write Kitty and tell her that I've moved. But I never did. But as I've told you, those are facts that don't mean anything. The only things that matter are that we grew up. And she swanned from that insurance building. And that Kitty was the one who always believed the hay would be there. Kitty was the one who had said, I knew you must be doing something to fix it. Those things matter. And Kitty's letter. People move around so much now, and it's funny how those crossed-off addresses and change of address stickers can look like accusations. She's printed her return address in the upper left corner of the envelope, the place she'd been staying at until she jumped. A very nice apartment building on Van Nuys. Dad and I went there to pick up her things. The landlady was nice. She had liked Kitty. The letter was postmarked 2 weeks before she died. It would have got to me a long time before, if not for the forwarding addresses. She must have got tired of waiting. Dear Larry, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and what I've decided is that it would have been better for me if that last rung had broken before you could put the hay down. Your Kitty. Yes, I guess she must have gotten tired of waiting. Oh, I'd rather believe that than think of her deciding I must have forgotten. I wouldn't want her to think that, because That one sentence was maybe the only thing that would have brought me on the run. But not even that is the reason sleep comes so hard now. When I close my eyes and start to drift off, I see her coming down from the third loft, her eyes wide and dark blue, her body arched, her arms swept up behind her. She was the one who always knew the hay would be there. Introduction information for this episode is from a 2021 article on biography entitled Stephen King. Please contact us right here in comments or email us at fastasleepwithginamarie44@gmail.com or reach us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Your reviews and likes and comments and subscriptions, you know, they keep us here for you, and we truly thank you for listening. Key word: brother. And next week, a lovely story about friends from Guy de Maupassant. Good night.